and welcome to episode 6 of my new podcast, Why Didn't Anyone Tell Me This? With my guests, we are discussing health issues, questions you may have, and debunking some of the myths about our health. And it's an absolute pleasure to introduce Karen Newby. She is author of the Natural Menopause Method. And Karen is a registered nutritional therapist who specialises in women's hormone health, especially at menopause, with over 10 years clinical experience. She holds a BSc in Nutritional Medicine, and she runs a specialist menopause clinic and hosts regular retreats, corporate talks, and workshops on the subject. She's very much a complementary practitioner, often working with GP menopause specialists and women on HRT. Her approach is highly practical, realistic, and achievable as we deal with very low bandwidth in amongst our turbocharged modern day world. So it's an absolute pleasure, Karen. And she held a retreat last Saturday, and I was very privileged to go and have dinner with her the night before. So we really did have a great catch up with how we felt about menopause and much, much more. So, Karen, I would love to hear about your work and why you became a nutritionist.
Oh, lovely to be here, Joyce. So yeah, it was a long time ago since I started my journey into nutritional medicine, and it was really came about when I was living overseas. I used to live in Asia, and I was in India for a while doing some yoga, and I started shadowing a Ayurvedic practitioner, an Ayurvedic doctor. And I was blown away by how this kind of ancient 5,000-year-old system of healthcare would actually be prescribing patients diet interventions, herbal medicine, as well as cleansing processes and, yogic asanas and postures. And it was just mind blowing to me because I was just like, wow, I can't believe this is this is going on. And in the West, we think we're so far advanced with our scientific knowledge, which, don't get me wrong, I think modern medicine is amazing and science is amazing. And everything that I talk about is based in biochemistry. But these kind of ancient healthcare systems, the same goes for Chinese traditional medicine that have been going on for 5,000 years, truly resonated with me, and is why I decided to start doing a distance learning degree at that time, because we were in Vietnam, of nutritional medicine, and I've never looked back.
Fantastic. And, we are what we eat, and we're reading so much more now about helping reduce dementia, cancers, heart disease, and obviously exercise and movement are important, but our diet is so important. I think it's something that people have really underestimated, and we do lead really unhealthy diets in the Western world, don't we?
It's really interesting. I think for many of us, we don't, many of my patients don't have bad diets, as it were, but they're just not nutrient rich. And I think this is the issue that, we have a lot of energy rich foods in our diet, which are, carbohydrate rich, or like bread and pasta and rice and things like that, but they don't give us the spark plugs, the vitamins and minerals and essential fats and proteins that actually we need. Our body is one big chemical reaction, and that's why it's my field of work is fascinating to me still, because if we don't have those kind of raw ingredients, then we're just not going to go as well, basically. So there is that sort of lack of vitality, if you like, as opposed to just working with the absence of disease, and that's why it's nutritional medicine is exciting.
Fantastic. So let's talk about the menopause and your wonderful book, which I recently read, and I learned a lot, and I was been thinking a lot about it since I read it. So it's called the Natural Menopause Method. Tell us more.
Yeah, so it's a nutritional guide to perimenopause and beyond, and I wanted to write something that would be very easy to read, that would be very evidence based, because I'm passionate about my trade, and I'm passionate about making us aware of the science that is behind it. It's quite often my industry is sort of waved away with that whole concept of eat a balanced diet. Well, what does a balanced diet mean? And for many of us, we we find that difficult anyway. So the book is about helping us at this stage of life where we feel very overwhelmed. And I think for many of us, we are so stressed that we wake up every day hoping for a better outcome. And that better outcome doesn't happen because we're so stressed and can't think straight. So I wanted to write a book that was very easy for women to access and dip into. And for me, the sort of the troubleshooting section at the back is basically, if you've got specific issues or specific symptoms, you can just have a quick look at, what might be going on, what therapeutic foods to add in, and also supplements as well, which is often a bit of a minefield for us. So yeah, that was my rationale behind the book.
And I think your book covers so much great advice, not just for the menopausal woman. So you actually start with the menstrual cycle and how we need to listen to our bodies. And you talk about the 4 shifts. Could you tell us a bit more about the 4 shifts?
Yeah. So, the reason why I do start with our cycle is I think for a lot of us, we haven't listened to our body, and our body, is telling us things. And it's 20,000 years old. We haven't really changed much since then. And yet we're so far removed from our natural rhythms. And I think for most of us, of our generation anyway, when we started our periods, we spent our whole life kind of, quashing those ebbs and flows and sort of ignoring them, because we lead such a male pattern of life. Although I think our daughters of today are having a different experience, which is great. So the 4 shifts are there to work on our systems, really. My work is, I'm a functional medicine practitioner. I'm looking at all the different systems in the body. How well are they functioning? And this then has a big sort of ripple effect on the, often far-reaching symptoms of perimenopause and beyond. So I start, my shift 1 is all about stress and life load. And for me, I think one of the reasons why we suffer so much more than our mothers did is because our modern day life is so extreme. Often we're working full time. For a lot of us, we have young children in the house, or dare I say it, the joy of teenagers. And for many of us, we're dealing, we're very, very squeezed. We're often dealing with, wheels falling off parents, dealing with loss. We are just basically overwhelmed. And for me, I want women to actually address this life load. So stress for me is my first port of call. And I can't do anything about your external stress. And I always say, I'm very sorry about that. But I can help your body internally when it comes to releasing stress hormone cortisol. So this is what I talk about in the stress section is, right, okay, what are 3 main triggers of stress hormone are blood sugar lows, for example. So I work a lot with women on supporting their blood sugar, because every time we get a low in blood sugar, which can mean we get hangry and shaky and faint, this releases stress hormones. So if you're already stressed and then you're getting these lows in blood sugar, that's going to make you even more stressed and can really exacerbate mood swings and anxiety. So that's one big section. And then it's also about elements that create more stress in our body, like a caffeine, for example, which, if you're stressed and you drink caffeine, that it will put you into fight or flight mode even more. So I'm not here to talk about removing anything from our diet. Actually, for me, it's about adding things in, but there are some kind of red flags as I go along, just to evaluate these things, and just to take stock and think, okay, is that serving me well, that caffeine, that first cup of tea or coffee first thing in the morning? And then the second shift is all about cleansing. It's about our digestive system. If our digestive system is not working well, then however great, however many sort of plants you're eating or juices or mung beans, if it's not being absorbed, it's a complete waste of time. So that's why that section's important. As we age, our digestive function reduces anyway, but, bloating and constipation and, liver issues such as, feeling nauseous, for example, is very much about the liver, or feeling nauseous after fatty food. So I need to help support all of our gastrointestinal, our whole, digestive function. for any food to be absorbed better, because we aren't what we eat, but we are what we digest, what we absorb into cells, and then actually what we detoxify and eliminate. So there's sort of 5 areas that sort of area looks at. And then there's the sleep section, because if we don't sleep well, we wake up stressed, and then that cycle of caffeine and carbohydrates continues. So, that's all about tomorrow starts today, and addressing this kind of sleep inequality that we have as women. Because actually, for me, this book is a women's, menopause is a women's rights issue. And I don't want women to be leaving work. I want women to have a good night's sleep and to be able to wake up and feel on point as their male counterparts in the workplace, so that they feel good about presenting and feel in control. That's my big thing. And then the 4th section is about eating and what to eat, how to eat, the importance of eating as the path of the sun. For most of us, we're backloading all our food to the end of the day. And so it's sort of how to eat, and then looking at the sort of menopause shopping list, what we need to be increasing into our food, the therapeutic foods, the antioxidant rich foods, which is going to help our brain function, and the oils that will help our skin and our brain and all of that. But so there is a lot of things to do. But in each of the sections of these 4 shifts, I have this little small shift section. So even if the words blur over you and it's too much, there's a little section there of little things. I like to call them my little small shifts that you can incorporate into your day. And then this causes this kind of ripple effect. For me, it's all about helping rewire the brain subtly, and the never underestimate the power of food to bring about health change. Supplements great, but HRT great. I'm very much a complementary practitioner. I'm helping women on HRT and those that are choosing the natural route. But food, like you said, chronic disease, so much of it is about what we're putting in here.
And as I said, your book is for menopausal women, but I think everything you've just said is really important, even as teenagers, when a lot of my work's on fertility, and when someone's trying to get pregnant, so everything you've said is absolutely relevant there then as well. And people are, there's certain life stages where we get reminders to start looking after ourselves a bit more. And I think the menopause is one of those crucial ones where women can have a wake up call and say, okay, we've probably got 20, 30 good years left, hopefully, maybe more. But now's the time to really home in on that nutrition.
Absolutely. And I think for so many, sorry, but I agree. So many of these, for us, pre-conceptual care, post-conceptual care, often we're having children, we're not looking after it, we're not re-nourishing ourselves, and then we're going on to have another child or maybe another one. Because, and this is my point that I make at the start of the book, is that we have this kind of hurried women syndrome, where literally we look after everyone else except ourselves. And men are great at not doing that. And they wouldn't begrudge us doing it either. But we have this kind of martyr thing built in. I don't know where it comes from, but yeah, absolutely. Nourishment is, it's a radical change that we need to make.
I want to pick up a few points that you said when you're talking about your shifts, but before I do you think that some of the symptoms, perimenopausal symptoms women get, could absolutely be controlled by their diet?
Absolutely. And I'm really passionate about that, and I see it daily in my clinic, because the thing is with perimenopause, and the reason why it is a bit bumpy is because the body is out of balance, and the body likes to be in balance. And everything in the body is about ratios as well. So when our hormones start to roller coaster, remember, we can have a real hyperstimulation of estrogen at the start of perimenopause. We can become quite sort of estrogen dominant, as the term goes, which one of those signs is heavy periods, or breast cysts, or breast tenderness, heightened PMS, heightened anger, are all signs of this kind of heightened estrogen, as our body has one last sort of attempt at sort of procreation. But there are, by helping the liver, by helping your digestive system, by helping the gut, by pouring loads of micronutrients to help the brain, by sorting out your blood sugar to stop hot flushes. A classic example is, hot flushes. When we get a low in blood sugar, this creates a release of not only the stress hormone cortisol, but the other stress hormones, adrenaline and noradrenaline. And these are vasodilatory hormones, steroid hormones, which create flushes. So, for example, if you're getting night sweats mid in the night, this can actually be exacerbated by a low in blood sugar, which creates, not only wakes us up, but creates this extra heat. So that's just one example. But things like aches and pains, menopause is seen now as an inflammatory stage in our lives, because estrogen is involved in our immune system, and causes, more, it's our sort of natural anti-inflammatory, or one of them anyway. And this kind of inflammation can cause aches and pains. So a lot of what I'm talking about in the book is actually anti-inflammatory foods and lifestyle. So these are things like, your omega-3 oils, and turmeric and ginger, which are putting out the flames of inflammation. And just being aware of pro-inflammatory foods like, sugar and gluten and, processed foods. Again, I'm not here to sort of talk about reducing things. Actually, for me, it is about the more you feed your body the good stuff, the more the body is like, "Ooh, this feels good," because the body wants to be well and it wants to be back in balance. So yeah, I am very, very passionate about helping women nutritionally, because the joy of helping get people back on track is that not only will their brain fog go, but their aches and pains will go. They'll feel more energized. They'll want to move more. They'll lose weight. So it's kind of, again, this kind of sort of this house of cards kind of falls down, but in a good way. And these symptoms start to, I would sort of see it like us, like a bit like an onion, and we're sort of peeling away each layer. And even that can be as simply as helping support your digestive system so that you can actually absorb your nutrients better. So yeah, lots of things
So
going on.
thank you. Sugar. So I just want to talk a little bit more. You've mentioned quite a few things, but in my first podcast, I explained how I have a very difficult relationship with sugar, and I really wish that I had sorted it out when I was younger. It's the only thing I'm addicted to, and everything I've been reading about it, about how toxic it is, and as you said, these sugar spikes are really not good for us. But you said you don't think. Do you not think we need to eliminate it?
So I think elimination diets in general are not sustainable. So if someone is showing signs of these kinds of highs and lows of blood sugar, or the classic is the 3 o'clock slump, which can often mean that you haven't had enough, or that you've had too much sugar earlier in the day, and then you're getting this massive crash, which leads to intense cravings for caffeine and sugar. So for me, the way that I approach it is not to strip out sugar, because actually, we are overwhelmed. We are, we feel very tired. We feel like we're having to do all these things. The last thing I want is to take people's kind of crutches away, as it were. But what I do, the way that I work, is to add more protein in. And actually, the more protein that we can get in every meal and snack helps to crowd out these cravings for sugar. So, for example, if you're having a breakfast that is very refined in carbohydrates, or you're having your sort of tea and toast, or just having lots of caffeine, because remember, caffeine can affect our blood sugar, then, and you're having sort of your quick sandwich, or sad sandwich, as I like to call it, with no kind of, a bit of gluten and a bit of carbohydrates, but nothing real, no real sustenance, no spark plugs of those minerals and vitamins. You will have those highs of blood sugar, and then you'll get those crashes. But if you have eggs for breakfast, for example, or if you have high protein granolas, like, there's lots of, making your own even can save you so much money, and adding in lots of nuts and seeds, but staying away from dried fruit, for example, which can be, is basically sugar lumps. And if you have that with dollops of full fat yogurt, none of this low fat, can't bear any of that, full fat, the fat and the protein will create satiety and will create heat, and then you will feel satisfied. And if you do the same at lunchtime, so at lunch I often have lots of either leftovers, which is a big thing for me, or I will have lots of things in the fridge that I can sort of put something together, like falafels and dollops of hummus, a few olives out of a jar, and some leaves and maybe some sauerkraut, but just a big lunch. We're not eating enough at breakfast and we're not eating enough at lunch. And if you do that, that 3 o'clock slump will not arrive, I promise you. And then you'll feel hungrier and you'll want to eat an earlier meal, and then you'll wake up feeling hungry again, because that's often the thing that happens, is that we don't wake up feeling hungry and then we don't want to eat breakfast, and then that cycle continues.
You talked about low fat, and it's so interesting that we seem to, with processed food, we seem to have got this so wrong. Low fat is everywhere, low sugar is everywhere, and all the nutritionists I listen to say stay away from all of this. So I don't understand why the corporate world has got this so wrong and is selling us these things that now everyone's saying we shouldn't be eating.
Yeah, so it's the classic example of a food industry that doesn't care about health, and unfortunately a health industry that doesn't care too much about food, or there is relatively low knowledge within our healthcare system for GPs or other endocrinologists to actually give some overviews of what a helpful diet would be in this instance. So with low sugar items, we'll start with low fat. It's got so much sugar in, and some of the big brands out there are still producing stuff that is low fat, but it's got the sugars, and sugar just converts to fat. But also the problem is with low fat items, or yogurts, for example, which is the biggest kind of area I would say this is an example of, is the fact that because it's low fat, you're not benefiting from the vitamin A, for example, that is high in dairy, because it needs fat to be absorbed, because it's a fat soluble vitamin. So this is why women that are dieting and doing this whole low fat thing, we do have to think about their vitamins, their vitamin status of A, E, D, and K, and then we have the sort of the low sugar things. I mean, I would say full fat yogurt is generally low in sugar. It's whole food, and it's about going back to as close to nature as possible when we're picking our food. Choosing food that doesn't have a PR campaign, which is when you kind of look at fruits and vegetables, your eggs, your pulses. When you go to the pulse aisle, it's all a bit dusty, isn't it? It looks a bit sort of sad, but they don't have marketing campaigns saying high protein pulses, whereas actually it's the processed rubbish that has all those slogans. And you have to, I think, as a consumer, we do have to always question, is this really helpful for me? And I always recommend for my clients to look at the back of pack, because by law, food marketing, they have to put by law the amount of ingredients by volume. So that if sugar is 1 or 2 of that in that order, it's going to be high sugar, and anything over 15 grams per 100 grams is high sugar. Always look at the 100 grams as well versus the serving size, because some of these cereals that I won't name any names, but some of the granolas, for example, make them, they look like, oh, it's a lovely farm and it's all healthy and it's got a nice name and a sunrise, and then you look at the pack and it's like 24 grams per 100 grams, and then the serving size is so small to make it look like per serving there's hardly any sugar. Whereas actually, realistically, your serving size is going to be a lot bigger. So, food marketing is a nightmare.
I wanted to talk about 2 drinks. So very common drinks, caffeine and alcohol. So I told you on Friday, I have never drunk a cup of coffee in my life. Not sure why. I just didn't. And it is a ritual. If you stand in one of the coffee shops, you watch people come in and they're almost shaking until they've got their coffee in their hand. And when I tell people I don't drink coffee, why not? It's so lovely. And also alcohol, something that's just become ingrained. And I see so many menopausal women who, when I ask them about their alcohol, they're drinking 2 or 3 glasses of wine every evening, without having any breaks. So tell us more about those two drinks and what you would advise to
Yeah.
really help menopausal women.
Yeah, so two things that are very legal along with sugar. Those three things, all legal, but are, have very adverse kind of biochemical effects because, the body again is 20,000 years old and struggles to work out, these, high, the sugar, the alcohol, and the caffeine. So with caffeine, I went decaf a number of years ago now. I think that's an amazing stat that you've never had a cup of coffee as well. That's pretty, that's interesting. It's very, very few people can say that. So that's good. But caffeine basically is, puts us into fight or flight mode. And it mobilizes stored glucose that is in our liver and creates, sends this glucose to our brain and to our heart and to our lungs and to our muscles, which is why actually, if you have got a lot of work to do, it can be very useful, which is why we're addicted to it. And I always say actually that only one cup of tea or coffee will only last you until the next one as well. So you get these highs and then you get those crashes and then you need more caffeine to bring you back up again. You go on this kind of roller coaster. So that was my point really about being stressed, is that then if you're already stressed, you're then suddenly putting, you're hanging off your stress hormones again, because you're basically priming your body as if it's in fight or flight mode on the savannah 20,000 years ago, whereas actually the body can't tell that actually you're not in any danger. You're just sort of sat at your desk getting stressed over spreadsheets and drinking your Americano or whatever. The biochemical reactions are exactly the same. And for me, we can be, genetically, we can be fast metabolizers of caffeine and slow. And both of them have positives and negatives. But, for me, I'm definitely a slow metabolizer. So I feel very jangly if I have too much. And I wanted to stop being a slave to caffeine. And I think for many of us, we can't get out of bed in the morning unless we have our tea or coffee. And I love the fact now that I don't have that kind of extremes. And it really helps your mood swings, and it really helps that afternoon energy slump. And it helps your sleep. So if you have any issues with sleeping, reducing your caffeine or avoiding it completely is an easy win. So if you do enjoy your coffee, then my biggest bit of advice is just to have it with breakfast, because this lessens the effect on your hormones. Enjoy one or two, and then for the rest of the day, enjoy your herbal teas and water. All we really need to drink is water. And helping your children, if you have them, to get used to drinking water is just a great life skill. um, and then alcohol, alcohol becomes, for a lot of us at menopause, kind of quite self-limiting. And I've definitely noticed this in my alcohol consumption, is that the hangovers become so intense and can last more than 2 days or whatever. It's just not very helpful. And the reason is because it is a massive liver toxin, as is caffeine. To be honest, caffeine massively affects our detoxification pathways. And alcohol is detoxified over anything else. It's detoxified first. And that, in my opinion, is a sign of how toxic the body views alcohol. So, the aldehydes, which are a byproduct of alcohol, can massively affect the cell and the mitochondria. And, again, I'm not here to say to people, stop drinking, but it's a subtle change. It's allowing yourself time to have days of the week not drinking, but also, in France, on the Mediterranean, they will have a little glass every day. And actually, this is more healthful than what we do in the UK, which tends to be like nothing and then binge drinking, which is just as is more harmful, I think. But having it with food, having small glasses, but also quality over quantity. So if I go out now, I will have a glass of champagne, which might cost the same as half a bottle of wine. But I will enjoy it and I will savor it and I will celebrate it. And I suppose this is my whole raison d'etre with anything to do with food. It's celebration. That cake, I want you to enjoy a full fat cake, please. None of this beetroot cake or anything like that, or more, no fat. Enjoy your fat, enjoy real sugar in a cake. but be mindful of it and celebrate it. And I suppose that's the same with me with alcohol. Less is definitely is more at menopause.
So I think your main message, everything in moderation. And I'm with you with the champagne. I've always been a champagne drinker. I'd rather have that one glass and then not have anything else. Annoyingly, I also don't get hangovers though. I don't know. I don't know. Maybe it's something to do with no caffeine. But yeah, I can't remember when I
Mhm.
last had that. I don't drink excessively that often, but when I have, I wake up and I'm totally fine, which is very annoying to my friends.
Oh, how annoying.
I know. Sorry. So can I ask you, have you heard people say, why didn't anyone tell me this? And what did they ask?
Well, I suppose, well, the sugar is a big one, I think. How to get out of those sort of sugar cravings. And I know that you have definitely sort of noted that. But also, I think it's looking after yourself more and putting yourself first. And that's why I love working with women in this space, really, is to help them at the age of 40, 45, 50 plus to suddenly take this radical step of putting themselves at the top of the to-do list. And it's, and like you said at the start, menopause, because we start to get this big shift, we are forced actually to re-examine our lifestyle and on our lives as well. um, and I think for so long I haven't put myself first, and even my cat, well, she does still go above me, but we are sort of, our male, for those of us who have male partners, they are wonderful at sort of putting themselves first, and they're not being selfish. They just have that in them. Whereas my husband will go for a run even if there's loads of stuff to do around the house, or weird times of the day, but he will go, and he wouldn't begrudge me going to do exercise or going for a run or whatever whenever I wanted to. But I think women feel like, oh, I've got to do this, that, and the other. And it's the same with sort of resting as well. My partner will happily sit and rest and watch some rubbish on the TV when the house is a tip, whereas we're like, oh no, must sort all of this out. But why? And I think, we are the central cog, in a wheel with, as I said, looking after everyone else. And we wouldn't have it any other way. I think being a woman is incredibly special, and we're very loved. And we have amazing friendships and amazing connections. But I do think that is something that I wish I'd done a lot earlier, really. But I'm certainly doing it as much as I can now.
I think you're right. That's a very common problem for women. And I always say, when you're on the plane, they say put the oxygen mask on yourself before anyone else. And I think at the menopause, if we don't really start spending some of our day looking after ourselves, then we are going to have more symptoms. We're going to have more symptoms, and we're going to increase our risk of some of the chronic conditions. So it's our wake up call time to, and it's not being selfish, it's just to start looking after our health so we'll be healthier to look after everybody else. So that's one of my mantras.
Mm,
Have you come across any
absolutely.
myths that you would like to debunk?
Well, the biggest one of my industry is the diet myth, which, the diet industry, I can't bear. I think it sets women up to fail, largely women. And I think it makes us miserable, and it makes us feel guilty. And, the reasons why we struggle with weight, especially at menopause, is because we have hormonal roadblocks that we need to get over. Whereas, that it's just such an old-fashioned dietic model of calories in plus exercise equals calories out, and it just doesn't work. Or it's not sustainable. I think we go on average of 4 diets a year, and as soon as you come off them, the weight comes back on. So the way that I like to approach it is, and also I see so many women not eating, and feeding, thinking that they're doing, helping themselves, but getting frustrated when they're not losing any weight because they basically put their bodies into starvation mode and they feel miserable. So yeah, that is a big bugbear of mine. And for me, my approach to weight loss is about an abundance of nutrient rich foods, which are largely, a lot of them are plants. So being more vegan, I'm not vegan myself, but eating more plants generally helps to give you that flooding of micronutrients, which helps wake up the thyroid, which helps boost, so support our metabolic rate, which helps our brain, which makes us feel lighter. I never ask women to weigh themselves. It's about how you feel. And the more vital you feel, and women will, not women, people will come up to you and say how well you look, because your skin will be better, and your hair will be glossier, and your eyes, whites of your eyes will be whiter, because suddenly you're nourishing your body, and then you'll want to move. And it's this wonderful kind of cascade of events that happens, and then the weight goes slowly. But that's what we want. The £2 a week, it goes, that's, no one has to weigh themselves. It's about how you're feeling, which is really important to me. And then, the world's your oyster, really, rather than this kind of deprivation. And there's a great bit of research where a piece of cake was shown to an American audience and a French audience, and they were both asked to say what was the first word that came into their head. And the Americans said guilt, and the French said celebration. And for me, food should always be celebration, and helpful food should always taste good. And this is what drives me to cook from scratch almost 3 times a day, because I want food to be nourishing, and that sort of to give us that deep-seated sense of contentment that you get from good food. And that's the exciting part of it is cooking again. Although cooking can be a drag if you have to think about what to cook every evening for the rest of your life. It is a drag, but everything that I advocate doesn't take long, and when you're cooking more plants, it's quick.
That's really sound advice. And we're the mothers of boys, and we know boys need a lot. They eat much more than we do. And back to industry. So things like, my watch, one of the readings on here is calories, and it is really annoying that, again, the corporate world and industry are bombarding us with, well, you've got to think about your calories, you've got to think about low fat, and so this information is not what any of the experts say, but we are bombarded with this.
Yeah,
So
and I have lots of clients that come to see me that know the calories for all the foods, because actually they've grown up with mothers who were doing the E plan, or the really extreme diets of the 70s and early 80s. And calorie counting is the biggest way to take any joy out of eating, is knowing the calorie content. It's like with the menus that have recently just put in calories next to cakes. I'm like, that is just so destroying the joy of eating a freshly made cake with a cup of mint tea with a friend. It's not all calories are made equal as well. It's just it's completely, it's just rubbish. So anyway, that's my that's my opinion anyway.
thank you very much, Karen. Now, what motivates you?
Well, the biggest thing I get is the joy of seeing clients that write to me, and or if I see clients more than once, it's just seeing their journey of, like, I often read back to them the first consultation notes that I've taken, because they forget, as you forget as well, as when you're on a sort of healing journey, if you like. And just seeing the change, even how they're sitting. They're not fidgeting anymore. They're not talking loads. They don't look anxious anymore or stressed. It's hugely rewarding. And actually, the wonderful thing about my trade is that I'm just a catalyst. That my patients are the ones that have made that change as well. And for me, health is about taking back control of your body and your mind, because this is the only place we have to live apart from our planet. And that's, to see that empowerment, I think, is hugely rewarding. Yeah.
Fantastic. So what makes you happy, and where is your happy place?
Well, as you can imagine, it's got a lot to do with food. I love food and I love eating. And for me, I just love cooking or going to friends' houses. I'm lucky that I've got some wonderful friends that can also cook amazing foods. I have a friend that has this, the tiniest kitchen ever. And the food that she produces from that tiny kitchen is just staggering. She is awesome. And there's nothing I like more than sitting around a table with food, with friends, and with family. And it is food as community, and that energy of being cooked for. And that's why, for me, cooking for yourself, even though can be, if you're not used to it, can be a drag, but actually suddenly you then start to get used to it, and that sort of feeling of nourishing yourselves and nourishing others is, one of the sort of the purest kinds of forms of connection I can think of, really. And so that's my happy place.
And what advice would you give your younger self?
Oh, I don't know. Not to take yourself too seriously. But I don't know. I feel that I have had it's been an interesting journey, and not to dwell too much on the. I think one of the biggest things is that when I became a mother, is expecting myself to be like my mother, who'd had, you know 30 years experiences of being a mother. And I think that's what I would definitely tell myself, when I first had a baby. So just the fact that we're always learning, that we don't know everything, and that we never will know everything, but just to go easy on yourself and not expect yourself to suddenly be this amazing whatever mother, or person with in their job or their career. So yeah, because it can be quite exhausting how much we put on ourselves, I think.
That's very sound advice. Well, Karen, you've given everyone lots of sound advice and you've been incredibly motivational. And those are two of the main aims I want to have for these podcasts. So I wanted to thank you very much. It's been an absolutely fabulous conversation. Thank you.
Thanks for having me.